What's up, everybody? Welcome to Ordinary Effort. I'm Mike, and we are not with Josh tonight. I'm flying solo on the Ordinary Effort end. Thanks for coming to the live stream. We have a fun guest lined up for you. We've got Ryan Finkelstein on as our guest tonight. He is the host of the Locked On Mets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Ryan, thank you for joining.
Yeah, for sure. Excited to play some grid and talk some Mets.
Absolutely. So before we get started, if you're one of our followers, you know the deal. If you're one of Ryan's followers and you've not been introduced to Ordinary Effort yet, we are on Instagram, on Blue Sky. We've got podcasts available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and we have a Discord server. You can find the links in the show description, and we'll throw them in the chat. So if you could throw us a follow, a subscribe, turn on the notifications, comment. We love responding to comments on the videos that we post, ratings, reviews, all that. Share it with your friends. We'd really appreciate it. So, Ryan, we are, 2 days out from the winter meetings now, right? They technically start on Sunday.
Yeah, I think everything really gets going on Monday, but people start showing up on Sunday. So you're start to see some reporters doing TV hits at the hotel and everything, but Monday is when all the craziness should hopefully start to unfold for us.
Okay. Now, have you actually ever been have you gone to a winter meetings in person before?
I have not. So my capacity with just baseball, I'm the managing editor. So me being away I could go if I wanted to, but it's harder for me to have the whole website running on my other job if I'm actually at the winter meetings. So I have not been yet.
All right. No, that makes sense. I actually almost, this is a long time ago, probably like 10, 12 years ago, I was trying to break into baseball ops and I was considering going to the winter meetings one year. I had like the whole travel plans lined up and I ended up falling through, but I've heard that it's a wild experience if you're able to go.
Yeah, for sure.
So normally on the show, Josh and I will do Immaculate Grid, and we are going to do Immaculate Grid. I've got a grid queued up. We'll pull that on screen here in a few minutes, but we're going to try to mix this in. We're 2 days from winter meetings. We're expecting at any time now, Juan Soto might be signing with somebody. We're hoping, right, that it's the Mets. And we actually just got news a little bit ago that the Mets signed Clay Holmes, so that's exciting.
Yeah, for sure.
Brian, so actually here, let's pull up the Immaculate Grid and we'll kind of use this. We'll kind of weave some of these boxes into the conversation. So we've got Immaculate Grid 378. Down the left side, we have the A's, the Yankees, and the Mets. Across the top, we have the Marlins, Red Sox, and played right field for a minimum of one game. So, Ryan, I thought it would be fun, and we were talking about this before. How do you feel about trying to fill out? Usually we'll go for the lowest rarity score, but how do you feel about trying to do this with all current or former Mets players?
Yeah, easily. Let's do it.
Cool. All right, so looking at this grid, we want Juan Soto to fit this right field column for the Mets. We're not there yet, but he does fit the Yankees box. Former Met that fits here is Darryl Strawberry, obviously. Is there anybody else that comes to mind for you?
I played right field for the Yankees too.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's low hanging fruit. I think that might be our best option on that one.
Strawberry. Yeah. I don't know. I know Ricky Leday was like a fourth outfielder for both teams. I just don't know if he played more left, center, right.
Actually, I got a good one.
Oh,
Granderson. Yeah? But I don't know if he ever played. I think he was more center for the Yankees. I'd imagine he might have played a game in right at some point, but Curtis Granderson would be another potential one.
Granderson definitely fits right field for the Mets. We could throw Granderson bottom right. You want to start there?
Yeah, we can do that.
All right, let's get Curtis Granderson on the grid. 3%. Not too bad to start us off. Okay, so Juan Soto. I know that this is like everybody's topic of conversation right now, and I was listening to some of the stuff you put out earlier this week, and some people picked up what you said was a prediction, and people took that as this is a report. What are you thinking happens as of right now, Friday night, a little after 10 p.m.? What do you think happens with Soto?
Well, it's interesting. My initial read on the Soto situation, I thought the Mets would be the team that landed him because I thought the Mets would be the only team that would go to 15 years and potentially the only team that originally would get to like 650 million. Now it seems like 700 million dollars is potentially in the cards, and 15 years might be what he's getting from any team. I think the difference from what's happening here compared to what I was sort of predicting was I was thinking originally the contract prediction I had for just baseball was 15 years, 645 million. That was in present day value.
Mhm.
I think he's going to get deferred money here. I think we're going to see a big flashy number. It might be $750 million. And he's going to get a little bit of that Otani deferred money kicked in, where it's going to bring the average annual value down a little bit. Maybe it is, instead of getting paid $50 million a year, which is I think what that would be the 750, 15 years, but maybe it brings the average annual value down to 45 million. At this point, I feel like the offers have gotten to a degree where I believe he's just going to pick the team that he wants to play for. I
Yeah.
don't know if the Mets or the Blue Jays or any of these other teams are going to be that far ahead of the bidding to land him. I think they've gotten the bidding because it literally has worked out exactly how they could have wanted it to, getting the Red Sox involved, having the Blue Jays potentially driving up the price, the Mets, the Yankees, like everything has worked out in their favor, where I feel like he's getting the contract that they were shooting for. And now it's just a matter of where do you want to play? Um, you know, obviously going back to the Yankees would make a ton of sense. And I'm sure he liked it there. I think the Mets have a compelling argument as well, though, as far as what their future looks like with David Stearns, the decisions that he's making, having Francisco Lindor locked up, a team that went to the NLCS. I've always believed to be Mets or Yankees. I'm still going to hold on to that. But at this point, we're just sort of waiting it out, seeing what happens.
Yeah, I know. So I've been running a fantasy league for over 12 years now. We're going into our 13th season, and we're a mix. We're all pretty much East Coast based, mostly a split of Mets Yankees fans. And I know a lot of Yankees fans are going to be outraged if they don't bring him back, just because of the way they traded so much to get him. And the talk was like, oh, he's a rental. You can't go get Soto and then let him walk. You have to lock him up. But I mean, I don't know what would be worse. Do you think it would be worse for Yankees fans if he goes to the Mets or to the Red Sox?
I think the Red Sox.
Yeah.
I think the Red Sox are their real rival. I don't think either scenario is great for the Yankees, but I also think that the idea of the Mets signing Juan Soto and being in the mix has been talked about ever since they traded for him. I mean, that was a topic on New York Sports Talk Radio all year long. So I think the shock of him going to the Red Sox would be way worse for Yankees fans. Either way, it's going to be bad if you lose a talent like Juan Soto. I think the Yankees could probably pivot and still have a really good offseason and still be right back in the mix next year. But yeah, I mean, considering how well it went, the huge home run that Soto hit that got them to the World Series, to lose him, it's going to be rough for the Yankees if that ends up happening.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, whoever loses out on Juan Soto is not going to be pleased. I mean, what's crazy about it too, like I know, like what the longest contract we've ever seen, is it 14 years right now?
Yeah,
I know.
Fernando Tatis
Okay, Tatis,
Jr. is 14-year deal.
and then Harper has a 13-year deal, and didn't Giancarlo Stanton sign 13 years with the Marlins like
Yeah.
7, 8, 9 years ago at this point?
Yep, those are the longest deals, and then like you've had a couple. I was Trey Turner. Trey Turner might have been 12 years, and Bogart's got 11. We're seeing more and more of these contracts beyond 10 years, which is insane. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if Soto got 16 at this point. I mean, who
No.
really knows? I mean,
Well,
it's wild.
I mean, Bogarts is in his 30s now, right? Or it was
Yeah,
in his age 30 season when he signed that long deal with the Padres. But what's crazy about Soto is he's 26. Like, he's 26 years old.
yeah,
If he signs for 15 years, I mean, normally these long contracts, like you're talking about, oh, they're going to be, the back end of the contract is going to be terrible. They're going to eat that money. And it's like, they'll probably get 8, 9, 10 good years out of him at this point. Whoever signs him for that long, where I think you take 5 years of eating the back end of the contract, if he even tapers off. Like, I mean,
yeah.
a lot of guys just like Nelson, I mean, not a lot, but I mean, I don't know. He seems like the type of guy that can just do it as long as he wants to at this
I,
point.
Yeah, I think for me, looking at this situation, seeing the Bryce Harper contract of 13 years, he's through the first 6 years of that. And I don't think anyone thinks Bryce Harper's going to slow down for the next 5 at least.
No.
So I look at the way Harper has aged, and will Juan Soto be playing right field for 15 years? Absolutely not. I mean, you can make a case that he's not great at playing right field right now, but he's going to hit.
Yeah.
I think you're going to get at least a decade of Juan Soto still being a really good hitter. And he's got the type of bat, the type of approach where you could still see him maybe not be a 900 OPS guy when he's 10 years into the deal, but still being a pretty effective hitter for a good portion of this contract. Age 38, 39, 40, those might get bad. But if you got 12 good years of Juan Soto before that and won a couple World Series, you're not going to care about those last 3 years.
No, I mean, for me, I've not actually seen, I've been alive technically for one Mets World Series. I was born in 86, but I was like 3 months old. So I don't really remember it. So I want to witness, I got to witness at least one, but I feel like if you get Soto, you have to be in the running for multiple over the course of that contract. All right. So let's throw we said we'd do former Mets. Let's throw Strawberry in this Yankees right field box. Soto obviously could fit here. 1% for Dallas Strawberry is surprising.
That is surprising.
Interesting. Okay. So I've been thinking about what happens for everybody who misses out on Soto. Obviously, there's still a number of big bats left on the market. Do you feel like that? I mean, this is probably a rhetorical question. Fair to say Soto's the first domino to fall in terms of free agent hitters? Like, is that? Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like that's the case. You're looking at all the teams that are in the running: the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Mets, the Blue Jays. The Dodgers are the only one that's technically still in the running that I don't think necessarily has to be playing at the top of the market the rest of the way through. But I think any team that doesn't get him could pivot, right? So the Red Sox, if they don't sign Juan Soto, maybe they are going to get in the mix on Corbin Burns. Maybe they're going to get in the mix on, I don't really necessarily see Alex Bregman as a fit, or even Pete Alonso, because they have their corners kind of set. But you never know. They could always, there's been some talk about them trading Tristan Casas or sliding him to DH. So every team has sort of an alternative plan, you would think. For the Mets, obviously, if they don't sign Soto, it might just be, all right, let's bring Pete Alonso back. I could see them getting Pete Alonso and Juan Soto, to be honest. But yeah, I think, the reason why this has played out the way it has is because Scott Boras has a lot of top free agents in this market. He always does, but particularly this year. And I think clearing Juan Soto out, having that big domino fall leading into the winter meetings, that's going to allow him to do his work on Alonso, Bregman, Burns, all of those guys Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in the winter meetings, because those guys are going to be highly coveted across the board.
Yeah, I remember listening to one of your episodes from earlier this week where you're talking about like that cluster of Boras clients and do teams sign one guy to get another guy, kind of, giving Boras the rub, so to speak, where, okay, we'll do this one guy is solid. Now bring this other guy in too. I mean, if the Mets bring in Soto and they bring back Pete, I think every Mets fan would be ecstatic, unless for some reason you're worried about sustainable payroll. But at this point, I don't think Steve Cohen cares. Like, even with the competitive balance tax, like we have to be all in every year, I think, at this point.
Yeah, I think if you remember the offseason a couple years ago, it didn't lead to a good season for the Mets. But when they signed Justin Verlander and Kodai Senga, and they get Jose Quintana, they bring back Nimmo, they brought back Diaz before free agency really got going. I think, that was like Steve Cohen just really, really flexing the financial muscles. I think once, assuming the Mets can land Soto, I don't think that's going to be, all right, we got our guy, let's stop. I think that's going to just invigorate him even further to keep pushing it forward. And I know John Heyman mentioned it today. I've been talking about it on my show for weeks now. The idea that the one sort of concern with the Mets might be having protection in the lineup for him. So I think if you're in these meetings with Juan Soto and Scott Boras represents both Soto and Alonso, I'd imagine at some point Pete Alonso is a topic that's broached. And I would think that the Mets would be conveying like, yeah, we'd want to bring both of you in. Because as great as Mark Vientos was this past season, I think Juan Soto would still feel more comfortable with Pete Alonso protecting him in the lineup than Mark Vientos. So I think if the Mets land Soto, they're not going to be done. I would be surprised if they signed Soto and Corbin Burns or Corbin Burns at all.
Mhm.
But as far as Pete Alonso, I'm still of the belief that he's going to come back to the Mets either way. I think if they sign Soto, they'll want him around to be part of that team. If they don't, I don't know where else they would pivot to in this market, because I don't think Alex Bregman makes a lot of sense.
No.
I guess Willy Adames is the only other sort of potential option, but personally, I don't really love that fit. I'd rather just see them keep Vientos at third base and roll with a corner infield with him and Pete Alonso that could hit 80 home runs for you next year if everything breaks right.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Vientos. And actually, real quick, I want to just jump to the Mets Red Sox box, because this kind of ties into a thought I have about Vientos, and I want to know what you think about this. But so JD Martinez works for Mets Red Sox, right?
Yeah.
You cool if we throw? I mean, there's several guys who work here. Pedro Martinez, like a lot of big names. Tom Seaver pitched for the Red Sox, right?
He did. I was who's the guy who got crushed in the World Series? Schiraldi.
Calvin Schiraldi, yeah. We've used him once or twice before on a Mets Red Sox box, but yeah.
If we're going for rarity, I don't know what would be the rarest there, but yeah, a lot of different options.
I want to throw JD Martinez here, and there's a reason for this, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right, so JD Martinez, Mets Red Sox, 0.8%. That's a hidden gem. That is lower than I expected to be also. So that's pretty good. All right, so JD Martinez, you're talking about Mark Vientos. And if I remember correctly, from the things that I was reading and hearing on broadcasts and all that kind of stuff, when the Mets signed JD Martinez prior to the 2024 season, Mark Vientos was the odd man out, right? He's the one whose roster spot was basically went to JD Martinez. So Vientos goes to the minors, Martinez gets a late start, and then Vientos comes up. And he hit, 27 home runs this year in the regular season, and then tacked onto that with a monster postseason. Two questions. One, do you buy? I mean, obviously, Pete Alonso, I think you're right. We do feel more confident in him protecting Soto if Soto is in the lineup. Do you buy Vientos? Do you buy that Vientos is the player we saw in 2024?
Yeah, I do. I mean, he was so good in 2024 that it's fair to expect maybe a little bit of regression. I buy the power is legit. I think this is a guy that he'll probably be a little more streaky than he was this past year. That was the two things that surprised me the most about Mark Vientos was the fact that he didn't have too many dips and he broke out of them really quickly, and the fact that he was able to handle third base pretty well. Those were the two things. I've been on the Mark Vientos bandwagon when he was a prospect for a long time. I was talking about him having 40 home run potential in 2021. I mean, you would watch minor league video of Mark Vientos and he would hit a baseball and somehow it went over the fence. And you're just like, all right, like this kid has insane power. So that part of it I buy into. And I'm buying into the work ethic now too, just to see how much he improved at third base. So yeah, I'm fully bought in on Mark Vientos, and I'm bought in on him at third base as well because of his arm primarily. Like you have guys that are definitely subpar at certain positions, but I like that Vientos has one definable trait on defense that stands out. He has a cannon, and one of the things he talked about was Francisco Lindor really getting him to focus more on his defense and how much that paid dividends. And the defensive metrics didn't love what he did, but actually kind of fitting into Mets Red Sox, I've compared Vientos to Rafael Devers a little bit as a guy that you kind of stomach the defense at third base because you're getting such a large offensive output. Now Devers is a better hitter as far as just batting average and things like that, striking out a little bit less, but I think it's a good comp as far as just swallowing a little bit of bad defense because you're getting such a superior offensive player at the position. And I am fully bought in on Mark Vientos being a good player for the Mets for some time here.
I agree. I want to believe that Vientos is for real, and I mean he has some prospect pedigree, right? Like there have been expectations for him for a few years now, and he seems to have put it together. But tying this into JD Martinez, because I remember seeing, I don't know if it was on one of the SNY broadcasts or whatever it was, but basically the idea that JD Martinez was a mentor, not just to Vientos. He was obviously just a clubhouse presence, absolute professional veteran player. But I'm under the impression that his influence on Vientos was massive. And I know that offensively, JD Martinez was not the same player this past year. I don't know. I haven't heard or seen anything about him hanging them up. I mean, I think he's still, as far as we know, intends to play in 2025.
Yeah.
For me, and I don't know what this would look like. I don't know if we want to use the roster spot on JD Martinez, but I want, if Pete Alonso is not coming back and Vientos is our starting first baseman, or even if Pete does come back and Vientos is our starting third baseman, what do you think about the idea of bringing JD Martinez back as a mentor specifically to Vientos, along with obviously the other young players?
The regression scared me a lot with JD Martinez near the end. He just wasn't the same player the last couple months, and it's hard to ignore the age. For me, the only issue I have with it is it just depends if you're a Juan Soto team or you're not a Juan Soto team. That's another side of it too. Because if you do sign Juan Soto, then I think Starling Marte is probably your DH. And so, theoretically you could trade Starling Marte, but if you're going to eat money on Marte to keep JD Martinez, I don't know if the fit is quite there. I thought JD was great for the Mets this year, definitely, especially the mentor capacity that I served with Vientos and others on the team. Yeah, he was absolutely great. I would be pretty surprised if he came back. I think there's a better chance of seeing Jesse Winker come back just because of the ability to actually stick him out in the outfield than JD Martinez. I think that DH spot is probably going to be Starling Marte, assuming they're able to land Soto. And even if not, you could see the Mets maybe pivot to a different outfielder and still keep. I think ideally David Stearns would probably prefer to be able to cycle multiple guys in and out of that DH spot. I think JD Martinez last year just presented too good of an opportunity to get a guy with his talent that late in spring training for that dollar amount that the Mets just couldn't pass up on it. I mean, he literally just fell into their lap.
Yeah. No, what was it, like a $12 million deal that he signed or something?
And there was deferred money in it that brought the luxury tax number down to like $9 million. So because the Mets are paying 110 cents on every dollar as the top luxury tax threshold clearing it. So yeah, I mean it was just perfect. And I was talking about at the time, like the market for JD Martinez just wasn't going to be there, and it was pretty much picked between the Giants, the Angels, and the Mets. And of those teams, the Mets were obviously the most attractive. I don't know what his market's going to be this time around. I don't know if there's another team out there that is going to want to DH like JD Martinez. I wouldn't rule it out entirely, but my assumption up to this point is that JD Martinez will be with a different team next year.
Yeah, I think that you're probably right. I guess in my head, I'm just thinking about my concern would be is Vientos the same player without the mentorship of a guy like JD Martinez? And maybe I'm overhyping or over, anticipating what that influence would be, but we know it worked last year. So I don't know. There's a part of me that would like to see him kind of still be there to kind of mentor Vientos.
I think that as much as JD Martinez helped him, I think Vientos takes his cues a lot from Lindor, and I think that having Lindor next to him on the infield, I think that's going to be enough. And I honestly just believe that Mark Vientos just needed an opportunity. I mean, I think JD Martinez obviously helped, but I think getting everyday reps and having, the pressure was so much different when you have Buck Showalter playing you once every 3 days. Now, this past year, it was all right. You got third base. The keys are yours. And I think that's what really kind of pushed him along, because this is a guy that every level of the minor leagues he hit. And I always expect him to hit once he got time. And this year he got the time to really grow and do it.
Yeah. I mean, if we get playoff Vientos, I think everybody will be over the moon. That was like Daniel Murphy-esque what he did in the postseason. Yeah. I'm seeing some stuff in the chat here. Some people are throwing names for the grid. Why don't we hop into a couple boxes here? Why don't we throw a couple pitchers? why don't we go to Yankees, Marlins? We got Tom suggested Al Leiter for Yankees, Marlins. He obviously worked for Mets, Marlins as well. There's a few pitchers that work in this Marlins column. Do you have any that come to mind?
Let's see. I mean, I was thinking Mets, Marlins, Braden Looper was one, but let's see. Marlins. Are we doing Mets, Marlins, or Marlins, Yankees?
Let's start with Mets, Marlins. I forgot about Braden Looper. You have Armando Benitez there, and you have who was the AJ Ramos? Remember?
Yep, AJ Ramos. Yeah, that's got to be low on the score.
I'm not sure because closers sometimes are more, like if he was strictly a middle reliever, those tend to fly under the radar. He was a closer for a few years. I mean, I still think he'll be low.
Luis Castillo is another one.
I can't bring myself to put Luis Castillo. I was in Chicago when the Mets for that game where he dropped the pop-up, and I'm still not. I don't think I'm over it. I can't. Every time I hear his name, I cringe. Although Luis Castillo, the pitcher, is another interesting name, but we'll get to that in a little bit. I don't know. Do you want to throw Looper here? Do you want to throw Ramos?
Yeah, either one works for me.
Let's go with your guy, Braden Looper. 0.4% hidden gem. Beautiful.
There we go.
All right. Now we had Tom say in the chat, Yankees, Marlins was Al Leiter. I'm trying to think of, did El Duque pitch for the Marlins too? Or am I thinking of Livan Hernandez?
Livan Hernandez did.
Okay.
I just had one too. Gary Sheffield, that might be a pretty obvious one.
Sheffield's a good one. That's true. Yeah. We've got somebody in the chat saying, I don't even know how to pronounce this. Orestes Destrade. Is this for Yankees, Marlins, also a former Met?
I do not recall that one at all.
I don't know. Oh, here's one from Drew, Graham Lloyd. And I think Graham Lloyd had a season with the Mets, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't recall Graham Lloyd. Al Leiter definitely was all three. I know that, but Danny Echeverria, if he was over with the Yankees, he definitely was with the Mets too.
I don't remember him on the Yankees, but I know he was because wasn't he the guy who he went to the Mets? I think he had been on the Braves prior, and then the Mets released him, and he went back to the Braves, and he made some kind of comment about how he was relieved to leave the Mets clubhouse or something.
Something like that, yeah. Okay. Yeah, he took some shots on the way out. I do remember that.
All right. It seems like people in the chat are confirming that he was on the Yankees. So let's throw him here. 0.6%. And he's in the Braves hat. Beautiful.
Wow.
All right. Okay. So I wanted to talk about the starting rotation because obviously with the news of Clay Holmes breaking a couple hours ago, they also signed Frankie Montas earlier in the week. And then there's the Soto. Do they, don't they? Where do you think the Mets rotation goes from here now that we've got, clearly what Stearns has been able to do with the lab with Minaya and Severino and Quintana last year, it seems like they're going for that again this year. There's been some success of pitchers who are converting from relievers to starting pitchers. Lugo, Michael King, Reynaldo Lopez going back to the rotation, Garrett Crochet. Do you think... I don't know that anybody thinks that the Mets have enough. Do you think that the Mets are going to continue following that pattern, or do you think they maybe go for one of those frontline aces, Burns, maybe Roki Sasaki? Where are you thinking they go?
I think so. Roki Sasaki is one where I think it's that's almost just a cherry on top. I don't think you're planning your offseason around it. It's going to be well past the winter meetings when he gets posted. He's going to try to get posted so that he can be part of the next wave of international free agent spending. So once the calendar year changes on that for baseball, where then you can tap into the 2025 class, more teams will have money to spend. So that's going to be a little further down. He also had some injury history last year. He didn't pitch a full season. So I think if you get Sasaki, that's an amazing long-term thing, and he'll be a part of your rotation next year for sure. But I don't think you're banking on that. So as far as where they're going to target, I think if they miss out on Soto, that's the only way I see them getting in on the Corbin Burns sweepstakes or even Max Fried. I think it's pretty clear that David Stearns has a type when it comes to starting pitchers, and that's trying to find some value, trying to find some upside guys. Frankie Montas was a great example of that. You have a pitcher that had shoulder surgery back in, I want to say it was 2022, missed all of 2023, pretty much. He made like one start. And then last year was his first year back, got up to 150 innings. I was looking at the pitch data myself. There is a lot to like. He's a guy that has, good fastball, really good split. So I could see him going to the Mets and really unlocking stuff. I think you can have high hopes you might get similar production to what you got from Luis Severino out of Frankie Montas. So I thought that was a really nice signing, especially when you saw what Severino got with the A's, which I think his market was probably a little bit lower than that. I think he probably got an extra like 5, 6, 7 million to play for the A's. But with all that said, I look at what they've done so far. Clay Holmes comes in, and it's a potential to unlock the next guy that can make that transition from leaving to starting. But if not, you have an 8th inning guy for Edwin Diaz, so it sort of works either way. I imagine that they're still going to probably sign a couple more starters. Walker Buehler has been mentioned. That's another guy that has a really good track record, but coming off a down season, saved it with an amazing postseason. I almost feel like if they sign Soto, the best they'll do in free agency is bringing back Sean Manaea. But I think that's a reunion that they'd be really interested in. And if they do bring back Manaea, I'm pretty comfortable with where the rotation's at, even if they didn't add anyone else. But I think Manaea is sort of the top of what they might get if they don't sign Soto, or if they do sign Soto. If they don't sign Soto, I could see them maybe having a change of heart and diving headfirst into the Corbin Burns sweepstakes.
I go back and forth on whether or not. I mean, last year I wanted Corbin Burns. In the past, anytime Corbin Burns has come up, I've wanted Corbin Burns, and now I'm not so sure. And maybe that's just concerns about injury. But then Walker Buehler, he's had multiple Tommy Johns, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like,
I think he had one in college.
Yeah.
And then either one in college or in his minor league. I'm pretty sure it was college, and then this is the second one.
Yeah, and with Buehler, obviously we know his upside is he's a frontline starting pitcher. If he can be anything close to that again, that'd be beautiful. I think there's a few guys here that if we get top performances from them, that's going to be a pretty solid rotation. I don't know. I'm not sure what Buehler has. I mean, I've always liked Walker Buehler. I'm concerned, I guess, just because the Mets have had so many injuries come back to bite them. They would always. I feel like their MO with the Wilpons was sign that guy who's just coming off an injury because he's a little bit cheaper, and then more often than not, they didn't really work out. So I don't know. Can you see a scenario? I know there's been talk about the Mariners are in trade talks, possibly open to moving some starting pitching. The Marlins possibly open to moving some starting pitching. Can you see a scenario where maybe if the free agent market isn't what the Mets want it to be, they go out and get, even if it's not a Garrett Crochet or a Logan Gilbert, maybe like a Jesus Luzardo from the Marlins or one of their pitchers?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Jesus Luzardo, the question is, are the Marlins interested in selling low on him off of a really down season? The Mariners, I mean, if they are trying to be really creative and move some money around, could you get Luis Castillo? But I kind of feel like they sort of like what they have there. It seems like if they're shopping any pitchers, it's a Brian Wu or someone that's a young pitcher that has a lot of value on the trade market because of not having that contract. A couple of names that jump out to me right now: Pablo Lopez. The Twins have been clearly, trying to cut money, and his contract was backloaded to the point that he really wasn't getting paid until this upcoming season. So that's a name that isn't really publicly out there, but I definitely feel like you could see him get moved. Another one that I talked about, the Rangers are really trying to bring back Nathan Eovaldi. If they do that, they might have to try to move a different starting pitcher to clear some money. John Gray is going to be a free agent after this next season. he was outstanding to start last year. And then I think he like pulled his groin twice. John Gray to me is the type of like David Stearns move, underrated guy. If he was a free agent, I feel like he'd be all over a guy like John Gray. So yeah, I think the tough part to, and I do this all the time on my show to play GM for the Mets now is David Stearns always making the move that we don't see coming.
Yeah.
So it's the guy that we're not talking about. And then it's, just like no one had Paul Blackburn on the market at all last year or even thought about him. And then it was like, well, that's actually not a bad trade. So I think he probably, if he makes a trade, it might be one of these underrated guys that we're not seeing. But I just imagine overall they're going to get some depth here. They're going to get a couple of guys to keep building out this rotation. I don't think that they're going to go into spring training completely fully banking on, 3 of the spots being employed by, Montas, Holmes, and like Tyler McGill. I think the idea is to maybe build out a 6-man rotation where Tyler McGill and Paul Blackburn and Jose Budo, those guys are beyond your top 6. Because if Kodai Senga's in the rotation and healthy, I imagine they're going to have a 6-man rotation, which is kind of another wrinkle that they have to think about.
I really hope that they go with the 6-man rotation. I've kind of felt that way. I don't know if I would say consistently felt that way over the last decade, but even going back to when they had, like the Harvey, Syndergaard, Matz, Wheeler rotation, like keeping those arms fresh and healthy, and especially when they started getting injured, I've always kind of in the back of my head, I'm like, maybe just go to a 6-man rotation. And I feel like very few teams do it. I know people have talked about the Dodgers doing it. That rotation is insane. I'm all for a 6-man rotation, especially if they have the depth and if they're going to go out and get these guys that they can unlock with the pitching lab. I mean, maybe you're right, Pablo. I used to be skeptical of Pablo Lopez, and so Pablo Lopez 2 years ago was outstanding. Pablo Lopez last year, if I'm remembering correctly, he kind of had a bit of a regression where he wasn't quite the same pitcher.
A rough first half, and then he really came on strong. Yeah, so that's definitely it doesn't jump out as a frontline starter, but Pablo Lopez at his best really could be a frontline guy for you. Got experience pitching the division, and again, I think the attraction there is the fact that he's on a big contract, and I don't think it would cost you an arm and a leg on prospects to get a deal done. And I think the Mets, like to trade for a Garrett Crochet, for example, their farm system it's progressing. They've definitely developed some arms that they really like, but pretty much every prominent top position player prospect outside of Luis Angel Acuna was hurt last year. I mean, even beyond just Jet Williams and Drew Gilbert, even going down to a guy like Jacob Reimer, who they were really high on, he was out. So I just don't know what prospect capital they have to really swing a huge deal. Like even getting Luis Castillo, I think probably costs more than Pablo Lopez. To me, Pablo Lopez is attractive because I think the Twins would love to get off of that money, just with where they're at, where you can maybe pull off a deal with them. And same thing with the John Gray idea. Like I think John Gray you can basically just get by taking on the contract, and I think the Mets can maybe tap into something more.
Yeah, I like the Castillo contract. He's one of those guys when he was in Cincinnati early on. I didn't love his walk rate, but he seems to have really locked in with the Mariners the last couple seasons. And he's only, what's his contract? 5 years, $108 million. So you're looking at a little over $21 million a year. That seems, I mean, we just saw Severino get 23? What the AAV on that contract is 23. So if you can get Castillo at 21 and the Mariners, I feel like DePoto likes to kind of lose salary, gain salary, kind of play neutral with the trades. I don't know.
It's an option. It's an option for sure. I'd love Luis Castillo. I mean, he's the best pitcher of those trade targets we're talking about. I'd prefer Luis Castillo over Garrett Crochet in a vacuum, even just because I see so much risk in Garrett Crochet with the huge injury, the huge innings spike, how hard he throws. I'd be pretty worried about the Mets trading for him, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you there. On the topic of big trades, a couple names come to mind, jumping back to the grid here. There have been a few big trades, big players that have either been traded to the Mets or current Mets who were involved in big trades. And I think this top row is a good spot for a couple guys. Red Sox, A's. I mean, the first guy that comes to mind here is Cespedes.
Oh
He
yeah.
played, yeah. Who else do we have here? I think somebody in the chat said Mitch Moreland works there, and I think that's correct. He's not a former Met, but Moreland does fit this box. Are there any other guys that come to mind here, former Mets who played for Boston and the A's?
Did Jed Lowry ever end up on Boston at some point early in his career?
I think he did. I can't. He's another one of those guys with like the 7 at bats for over the course of the 2-year contract. Is like I can't. Luis Castillo, Jason Bay. I can't throw on the grid. Like I still get inherently angry when I hear these names.
My joke on Jed Lowry is I think he got like it might have been 2 years, 21 million, and I think he drew like 1 walk, and it was like a $21 million walk, something like that. Yeah. It was bad.
Yeah, you're right. No, Jed Lowry does fit here. Jerry's Familia, I think, fits here too. He pitched with the A's and the Red Sox, and I think the Phillies after he left the Mets, and none of those were really memorable seasons, I think. So he might be a low number here. I like the Lowry shout out, even though it upsets me to think about Jed Lowry on the Mets. You want to throw Lowry here?
Yeah.
Let's throw Jed Lowry. Breaking my own rule here. 2%. All right. Marlins, A's. Luzardo does fit here. Not a former Met or current
future Met, but
possibly a future Met. Yeah, I thought about that.
I wish AJ Puck would fit that because I wanted the Mets to trade for Puck at the deadline, but it did not happen.
What I don't know what to make of AJ Puck because he was obviously one of the big prospects coming up with the A's. He was involved in was he involved in the Starling Marte trade? I know they've had a couple. They had JJ Bleday in one of those deals. They made a few trades between those two franchises.
I don't remember for sure. I think I can't recall. Honestly, I think Bleday might have been for Puck, maybe. But
we've got a bunch of people saying Dave Magadan for Marlins A's, and that is not somebody I had on my radar. And I feel like that's going back to what he was on the Mets in the 80s, I think.
Yeah.
It
might be a good one for sure.
But why don't we take a shout out from the chat and go with Dave Magadan here?
All right.
Dave Magadan, 0.9%, another hidden gem. Beautiful.
And he's got the Mets hat on too.
He does have the Mets hat. Yeah, I love that. All right. Last 2 boxes, and then we can wrap up with outlook, let's say, for the off season. But which box do you want to fill in first here?
Played right field. Imagine Cespedes did at some point. I mean, he's more in left, but
I was thinking he might be more left. You have Starling Marte was center field. I don't know if he played any right field for.
I think you'd have a better chance on Cespedes because he just was started there, so to start his career. Marte would have probably just played center that one season.
I have another guy, and I think he moved around.
Billy Beane?
Oh, not Billy Beane, but
was Billy Beane a right fielder? I don't even remember I thought he was an outfielder, but I don't know.
Oh, I can't remember now. Oh, wow, that's going to drive me crazy. I'm going to have to look that up later. Not Billy Beane. No, but I think Jay Payton works here.
Yeah.
2000 Mets World Series team, and he played with a number of teams after the Mets. I think Baltimore, Colorado. I'm pretty sure he played in Oakland, and I think he played right field out there.
All right, let's try it.
Let's go Jay Payton. 0.1%. Beautiful.
There you go. That's another Mets hat. We're rolling.
Yeah. Jay Payton was that 2000 Mets team was very scrappy. Like Payton, what was that outfield? Payton, Agbayani. Who am I forgetting?
Payton, Agbayani.
because the infield was Olerud. You had Ventura, Ordonez, Alfonso, Piazza.
Ventura.
A couple people in the chat are saying Ricky Henderson. Ricky Henderson fits quite a few boxes here. The entire middle row. He was a former Met,
Does he fit the entire grid outside of the Marlins?
Oh, that's a great question. He might. Red Sox, yes. Yankees, yes. Mets, yes. My only question is, did he play more left? Did he play any right field? I think he was primarily a left fielder.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean he didn't get some time in right field. Yankees, Red Sox, Chris Young, the outfielder, not the pitcher. I think
he definitely played. He definitely played all three spots for sure.
He did. Okay. And then Joely Rodriguez, I think, has pitched for all three.
Yes. Joely definitely did.
Which one do you think would be better? Because Joely Rodriguez was a little bit more recent. Chris Young hasn't played probably in 6-7 years.
Yeah, it's been a minute. So maybe Chris Young would be a little bit better.
Chris Young. Do you have anybody else that you might want to throw here instead of those two guys?
I can't think of anyone else.
Couple people in the chat are throwing some names. We've got Tony Clark, Kelly Shopik. Okay. Ooh, Kelly Shopik. I haven't thought about him in a really long time. Rick Cerrone is another one. Rick Cerrone, by the way, and I'm going to take a quick second here. In our Ordinary Effort Discord server, we've got a nice little community where we do daily, we share our daily grids. We have a channel in there for that. We have a few nights a week, multiple nights a week. We've been doing team grids where people say they want to play and everybody gets a box and we just fill out grids. And Rick Cerrone comes up in the Discord, I would say almost on a daily basis. So if anybody out there is interested in Discord, interested in a fun baseball community, this is my one little plug for the Discord. And again, chat, the link will be in the description. Rick Cerrone, I trust everybody's word here. Eduardo Nunez is another good one. He played for... I forgot about Eduardo Nunez's time with the Mets. It was not very long, was it?
I don't even remember that, to be honest.
Great. So, man, I'll leave it up to you. Who do you want to put in this box? We've got a few great names from the chat. We threw a couple.
Oh man, maybe we go Chris Young.
Chris Young. All right, let's finish it out with Chris Young. I just need to make sure. So the Mets had both Chris Youngs. Oh, and their careers were very similar timelines. I think it's the bottom one.
If it's dangerous, we can always pivot to Cerrone.
Maybe we should do that. I think it's the bottom one, but you know what?
Go with chat.
Let's do the chat. Yeah, Rick Cerrone. I'm not spelling it correctly. There we go. 1 R. Rick Cerrone. 0.4%. Ending with a hidden gem. Total rarity score of 9. Beautiful grid here. We got some old players, some newer players, current players. Nice mix. Okay, so wrapping this up, I keep thinking about, and I think you mentioned it in your Thanksgiving Day episode where you're talking about just being thankful for the 2024 Mets, and I was just thinking about, I mean, it's been a roller coaster ride. Just to be a Mets fan in general is a roller coaster ride, but just the way the expectations have changed from going from 2023, where 2022 we had a great season, we had the disappointing playoff loss. Was it the Padres who knocked us out?
Yeah.
I think. High hopes for 2023. Middle of 2023, we're kind of middle of the road. We trade Scherzer, we trade Verlander. Seems like we're going to punt 2024, and then we got the 2024 season. And obviously things seem to be on an upswing. What are your expectations for the 2025 Mets? And that could be this could be specifically what does the roster look like, or just generally speaking, do we have pitching depth? Do we have what are your expectations for the future for this team?
I feel really confident with where the Mets are at right now. I mean, look, Steve Cohen coming in was obviously save the Mets fan base, because my first year and a half doing Locked On Mets 2019, 2020, it every week it was just another embarrassment from the Wilpon. So just clearing that was huge, but it was going to take some time. I think we all thought it would just happen immediately. But the biggest part of Steve Cohen being able to, have the franchise that he wants was getting that executive. And so once they got David Stearns, I think a lot of my sort of Mets angst kind of went away because I knew that they had the right guy, at the helm to make all the right decisions. And I mean, top down, just everything they're doing now. Anytime when they make a hire in the front office, it's a widely respected guy. So I'm totally bought into the decision-making process. I have no idea where they're going to go, honestly. I mean, it could be Juan Soto. It could be Corbin Burns. It could be Sean Manaea. It could be a bunch of middle-tier guys that the fan base gets pissed off about. But ultimately, I trust their ability to figure this thing out. And I think they have a good manager in place with Carlos Mendoza. I think Francisco Lindor this past season obviously had an unbelievable year on the field. But I think more than anything, I mean, I've talked about this on my show a bunch, but the whole turnaround, it started with Francisco Lindor getting in front of the media. Well, first locking the doors of the clubhouse, having that team meeting, forcing that accountability, and then holding himself accountable to the media, saying, yeah, I locked the doors. This is what we talked about. This is what we need to be better at. And then the next day he goes 4 for 4 with a home run. It was just unbelievable what he did. So for me, this past season, it was Lindor learning how to lead in New York. And I think Lindor has been greatly underappreciated as a Met so far. But this past year, I think he finally got the fan base completely on his side in a way that I think was pretty awesome to see. And so now with Lindor as the best shortstop in baseball for the past decade and still right in the middle of his prime with a really good young manager, with one of the best executives in the game and an owner that's going to spend and wants to win every single year, I feel really confident the Mets are going to be all in until they get a World Series ring. So I think Mets baseball 2025 and beyond, it's going to be a team that is always going for it. As a fan, like that's all you can ask for. It might blow up in their face every once in a while, like it did in 2023. You can't always predict that, but I'm at this point really confident that the Mets are going to be in it, and they have the right people making decisions. They have the right leader on the field. I'm as optimistic as I've ever been as a Mets fan.
Yeah, I agree with you on all of that. I think it's not often that I've been able to say, especially this early in the offseason. Usually I'm still kind of licking my wounds from more often than not a disaster of a season. But I feel okay with where we're at. And it's not a familiar feeling, but I'm good with it. Yeah, I think you're right. I think Cohen being the owner, Stearns, I love the Stearns signing as their GM. I think he's the right guy. They finally seem to be putting the right guys in place. I agree with all of that. I know better than to say that I think that next year's the year. I'm cautiously optimistic, but whether it's Soto or Pete coming back or both of them, I think you mentioned this in one of your shows the other day too, like just giving the benefit of the doubt to the front office at this point.
100%. Yeah, I look, I didn't have Frankie Montas as a guy that I thought the Mets should target, and then I look into it more after they do it. I'm like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense, especially at the dollar amount. So, and again, look, they have a clear cut, no doubt about it, dynasty in their league that is staring us all in the face with the Dodgers. It's not going to be easy to slay that dragon, and who knows if they will. But ultimately, as much as we all want to see a championship, I'm just happy with being relevant every year. And I mean, 2020 was obviously the COVID and everything else, but just like coming off of what was an optimistic season in 2029 and then seeing what they did with it, losing Zach Wheeler and like Rick Porcello and Michael, I was like, man, this franchise is going nowhere. So you go from that, making all the wrong decisions every single year, basically with even just hiring Brodie Van Wagenen. I mean, it was yeah.
Thanks for reminding me.
Yeah, I mean, there was just so many, and I'm mostly talking about what I've covered on Locked On Mets now since 2019. I'm not even getting before that, but for me, seeing the first couple of years of this thing when I was doing the show to where we've been at the last 4, it's just night and day. So I think the Mets have their best baseball ahead of them. When they get a championship, World Series title, who knows? But I'll take some NLCS appearances along the way. I'm cool with that.
Yeah, no, your lips to Steve Cohen's ears. I'm all in for that. Ryan, this has been a blast. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you to everybody who's engaged in the chat. Sorry if I didn't get to as many of your questions as you would have liked. I know there was a lot going on. Ryan, where can people who are not familiar with you yet and now are finding you for the first time, where can they find you?
So Locked On Mets is wherever you get your podcasts. Got a YouTube channel as well. Just look up Locked On Mets. And then also appreciate anyone who checks out the company I write for, Just Baseball. We got a lot of great written stuff going up all the time.
Beautiful. Ordinary Effort on Instagram, Blue Sky. We still have a Twitter account. We don't really post much there as much, but the community on Blue Sky is awesome. We've got a YouTube channel. Obviously, if you're here, if you're still here and you're not yet to subscribe to the channel, please subscribe. It would really, really mean a lot to us. We appreciate it. And if you want to listen to us while you're driving in the car, we've got the podcast version of our shows available on all major platforms. Again, thank you again, Ryan, for coming on. Thank you all for being here. And we'll see you next time.